We're so excited to share this with you today.
Absolutely. Let's dive into what Notebook LM can do.
Okay, let's unpack this. We've got a deep dive ahead of us that is certainly going to test our analytical muscles a bit. We are examining source material that's, well, it's not a research paper or a news report. It's actually a dramatic, pretty aggressive musical anthem.
Right.
It's titled The Zombie-Fueled Karen Apocalypse Anthem.
Yeah, it's an unusual format, definitely for a document of social critique, that's for sure. And given how intense it is, I think we really need to establish our mission right away here.
Good point.
We are here to analyze the core narrative, the specific rhetoric, and just the catalog of accusations laid out in this text. We're going to impartially report the viewpoint and the content of the document, you know, its internal logic, its choice of language.
Crucially.
Yeah, crucially, we are explicitly not endorsing or validating the extremely inflammatory and, frankly, politically charged claims made within this source. We're just looking at what it says.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our job is to understand the argument, however extreme it might seem. And the source, it leaves absolutely no doubt about its central antagonist. It calls them zombie Karens. These figures are described as creatures causing nothing but mess, associated with snarls, growls, and just being generally suspicious, or, like the source puts it, they seem sus.
Right.
And the text's rallying cry is loud and clear. You can't hate these fucking Karens enough. Yeah.
Wow. And what's fascinating right off the bat is that choice of descriptor, zombie.
Yeah.
It doesn't just convey, like, mindless malice. It seems to establish the antagonist as this literal pervasive force of decay. The source positions them immediately in the intro as fundamentally opposing any positive development. It asks rhetorically, would they plan a wholesome goal for a soul to grow?
And the answer is?
Well, according to the source, no. Instead, they're dedicated entirely to ranting and spreading a general blight.
And that concept of decay, it feels really rooted in sensory experience, which is, a powerful rhetorical tool.
Yeah.
The speaker in the text uses this highly visceral, almost disgust-based imagery. He says, I don't even like the way they smell or dress. And the central image of the antagonist in the source becomes the stench in the air, the rot in the dress. This isn't just name-calling. It feels like a systematic attempt by the source to frame this figure as, well, fundamentally toxic.
Toxic to the environment, to society itself, yeah.
Yeah.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this initial characterization seems designed to justify the need for total separation later on in the text.
Oh, okay.
I mean, if the threat is presented as existential and rooted in this kind of biological decay, then there can't really be any compromise, right, from the source's perspective.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So having established the zombie Karen as this force of, like, biological and atmospheric toxicity, the source then quickly moves to define their societal role. In verse 1, it calls them defenders of chaos.
Right.
This section is intensely polemical. It accuses them of actively working against basic safety, claiming they scream for invaders with knives, and even slash at people holding babies trying to survive.
The accusation is pretty clear there. The antagonist is actively inverting the moral order, defending the worst, leaving good men to die. That's the claim. But here's where the source introduces a kind of psychological complexity, or at least its version of it, using some very specific jargon.
Okay.
It claims these figures hate the unobtainium straight white male, yet simultaneously worship in secret.
Okay, let's pause on that phrase. Unobtainium straight white male. That's a loaded term. What's its function within the source's argument, do you think?
Well, within the source's own internal logic, this phrase seems to represent some kind of unattainable, maybe idealized figure that the antagonist, the Karen, both publicly rejects and secretly desires.
Okay, so a contradiction.
Exactly. And the friction between this public rejection and private obsession, according to the source, is what generates the profound psychological turmoil it mentions later. Prolapse dreams, null events, twisted obsession. So the source is basically arguing that the external chaos they supposedly cause is just a projection of their own internal, self-inflicted psychological instability.
That's a key insight. So the source sees the enemy's politics not as rational belief, but as a symptom of this deep-seated confusion.
Pretty much, yeah.
So if the individual is presented as unstable, the next logical step for the source seems to be finding fault within institutions.
Exactly. And that brings us to verse 2, which targets institutional manipulation, specifically focusing on mass media Karens.
Yeah.
The allegation here is one of total epistemological sabotage. It claims they are spin-in black as white adjacent, systematically denying major perceived events the source lists like invasion, abuse, and genocide's placement.
And the source uses some extreme hyperbole to illustrate this denial. It describes reporters dropping dead on air, still playing games, and repeating the mantra, vaccine safe, even while being dragged off live. Why? Why leap to such a visually graphic and, frankly, impossible scenario?
Well, it feels like a tactical use of extreme example, right? It's designed to instantly destroy all credibility.
Okay.
By linking the media to this scenario of self-destructive, almost, well, zombified denial, where denial persists even in the face of actual death, the source aims to convince you, the listener, that the media cannot be trusted on any topic.
Gotcha.
It wraps up this section by stating, irony's a bitch when the truth don't survive.
And the narrative then quickly connects this media critique to the social sphere in verse 3. The source asserts that Karens in our systems are spreading failed ideology, particularly operating within sensitive areas like social services. This paints a picture of, like, ideological infiltration rather than just organic system evolution.
Yep.
Yeah, the language here shifts from simple accusation to something more like pervasive infestation. It accuses them of creeping in like roaches
Wow.
and actively ruin men's lives with Big Pharma's deep sleep. Now, that phrase implies that the antagonist uses both the administrative power of social services and the medical establishment to suppress and incapacitate men. It suggests a kind of state-sanctioned sabotage.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think, because the source then provides its own historical context for all this supposed destruction.
Right.
It pinpoints the starting point as the period 100 years since We Want the Vote. It claims that this specific path led directly to building a girl boss army, stomping feminine truth.
So the source is framing historical progress for women not as liberation, but as a deliberate act of destruction aimed squarely at traditional structures.
Yeah, that seems to be the argument.
It details the alleged fallout: romance, marriage, families tossed in the grave. And this provides the supposed context for what the source then calls the cognitive dissonance dance.
Okay, tell us more about the mechanics of this cognitive dissonance dance.
Yeah.
What does the source mean by that?
Well, the source uses this idea to highlight what it sees as the complete illogic of the antagonist's choices and statements. They allegedly cry, "Where's good men?" while simultaneously picking bears to save, whatever that means in this context.
Right.
And shriek, "Don't approach me," while immediately whining, "Why don't men want me?" The rhetoric here is clearly designed to show the listener that the antagonist's actions inherently contradict their stated desires, therefore making their societal complaints seem illegitimate in the eyes of the source creator.
This theme of creation versus destruction, order versus chaos,
Yeah.
it seems to reach a kind of climax in the bridge section,
Yeah.
viewed through the lens of technology.
Yes.
The source gives men credit for building AI, sex bots, sci-fi dreams to soar, and also for decentralizing structures.
This is a really crucial pivot in the text. The source explicitly contrasts the creative, future-focused efforts it attributes to men like building AI and decentralized tech with what it portrays as the destructive utilization of tools by the antagonists. Well, the source claims women took tools given to them, even basic ones like washing machines, and corrupted their purpose, turned them into a tool for destruction, fucking up Rome's tomb, which is quite the escalation.
Yeah, from washing machines to the fall of Rome.
It's a leap. And the claim is that the antagonist is acting 4 times faster than men to hate and ruin things.
So the argument boils down to men create the means of advancement, and these zombie Karens immediately turn those advancements into instruments of societal decline.
That's the narrative it's building, yes.
Okay, so that moves us then into verse 4, which seems to cover the source's view of the irreversible damage and the ultimate consequence. No remorse, just ruin.
Right. The source argues that this ruin is permanent because the antagonists won't repeal the vote or burn bras for family court to choke. The battle, from this perspective, is presented as legislatively and politically lost already, creating this kind of closed system of negative consequences with no way back.
And the specific grievances listed here are very focused, particularly on the legal and familial sphere.
Yeah.
The source points to alimony, child support chains stay tight, claiming this results in dads ruined, abandoned, left in the night. And this entire system of consequence is, within the source's narrative, directly attributed to feminism's hellish spree.
And to really amplify this feeling of existential ruin, the source deploys its most graphic and inflammatory rhetoric when it discusses abortion in childhood.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it uses incredibly shocking visceral imagery. Things like bones torn from sinew, organs still throb, fecal blood stew in the abortionist's job, and concludes that graveyard orifices, innocence torn away.
Wow, that's pretty much the highest point of discussed rhetoric in the source, isn't it?
It certainly seems like it.
It feels like it aims to solidify that central theme, that the decay isn't just institutional or psychological, but literally biological and foundational, affecting the future of society itself.
Precisely. The goal there seems to be to prove, through shock and really visceral imagery, that the Karens, in the source's view, shredded the wholesome left decay. And this makes the current environment seem completely irreparable, which of course sets up the only viable path forward that the source provides.
Right. So if the destruction is portrayed as total and irreparable, what is the source's solution? The outro transitions pretty abruptly, actually. It seems to abandon the conflict entirely for a proposed resolution.
Yeah, it's called Supersede the Zombie Horde.
Right.
It suggests a final necessary separation, not a reconciliation, not even really winning the fight, but leaving it. The text describes the outcome not as victory in the existing conflict, but as an ascent and escape. The focus shifts entirely to that technological future mentioned earlier.
The sci-fi dreams.
Exactly. It says men will rise, no less, and build realms to the stars. The goal is simply to leave the sad, desperate whales behind bars. Metaphorical bars, presumably.
So the source's narrative arc concludes with this really radical separation, basically ignoring the antagonists and their chaos, leaving their hollow hate lost in time, as it says, and focusing entirely on a technological future, sci-fi we climb.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner, listening to this? We've journeyed through a highly aggressive and unusual source document today. It is a comprehensive articulation of a specific, pretty radical worldview. And it uses this zombie Karen figure as an all-encompassing symbol for a whole host of perceived societal failures, institutional decay, and the rejection of traditional family structures, according to the source creator.
Yeah, and I think the value of this kind of deep dive is really in dissecting the strategic use of rhetoric. You see, the language of disgust, the assertion of cognitive dissonance, that stark contrast between creation, which it links to technology and men, and destruction, which it links to decay and women. It really shows how potent and often grotesque imagery is deployed to justify a complete societal schism and ultimately the necessity of this kind of total technological escapism.
Indeed. And it raises an important question, I think, that connects the pieces we've analyzed. The source attributes institutional power. It mentions media, family court, social services, squarely to the Karens.
Right.
But it credits men specifically with building AI sex bots and relying on decentralized structures to escape. So what does this suggest about the source creator's view of where true power and legitimate creativity actually lie? If the chaos is supposedly so widespread and every existing social structure is presented as corrupted, well, what does the heavy reliance on technology and literally ascending to the stars imply? Is that the only viable escape route from this perceived social and political apocalypse?
It definitely suggests the source creator believes existing social institutions are beyond saving.
Yeah, it seems that way. That true legitimacy, or maybe true potential, only exists outside the current human domain, perhaps in technology or space. It's a pretty bleak outlook on society, but a strong belief in technological transcendence as the answer. Something to think about.